Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Melanin Margin, the weekly chat show where conversations about race are never off the table. We're your hosts, Quaviondre Williams.
And Daquon Wilson.
So let's get into this week's conversation. What's hot on the table this week?
Lizzo and Beyonce were trending together recently, but it may not be for only the reasons you'd expect. While the two most definitely have the songs and albums of the summer, many Twitter users were discussing the racism and double standards when it comes to disability advocacy and holding musicians accountable when using ableist lyrics in their songs. As disability lifestyle expert Ola Ujwumi tweeted, quote, currently hashtag paralyzed is trending as fans of Big Time Rush are asking them to release this song. I'm not seeing the same white disabled influencers calling them out for ableist language as they did with Lizzo and Beyonce. As a black woman wheelchair user, I ain't surprised. I will always stand by this argument that calling out ableist language is not inherently wrong. However, if that's the only thing you're doing and it's only being directed towards famous black women, find a hobby, acknowledge your racism, and do more than armchair activism. End quote. Here, Ojumi is referring to how both Beyonce and Lizzo changed lyrics to their songs Heated and Girls, respectively, that were called out for using an ableist slur. Other Twitter users chimed into the conversation, such as one who tweeted, quote, as someone actually paralyzed from an SCI, my disability is not a marketing trend. For Big Time Rush to use it as a hashtag to sell a song is ableist trash. Y'all came for Lizzo and Beyonce, but these men get a pass for ableism? Huh, wonder why. End quote. So, Andre, that begs the question. Do you think that there's a double standard when it comes to how people respond to ableism?
Absolutely. We've run into this before with the Whoopi Goldberg suspension from The View and the Will Smith Oscar slap debacle. Society holds a bigger magnifying glass on people of color and Black people already. So when we make mistakes, it's almost like a ha 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 got you moment for them. I mean, it's as if they're saying, see, we told you they don't know how to act, and that's why we're better. And the consequences that they dole out when we make mistakes are much worse in comparison. And this situation with Lizzo and Beyonce's accountability versus the accountability of Big Time Rush is no different. Lizzo and Beyonce are both successful Black women, constantly breaking records and raising the bar. But as I've already said, there are white people who see their successes and believe that they don't deserve it. Now, I want to be clear. We absolutely should take point from communities that we are not a part of to understand what is or isn't derogatory or a slur. However, we also have to understand that persons with disabilities can benefit from white privilege and further perpetuate white supremacy because they can be both white and disabled. That means that they still hold power over people of color and Black people who are also a part of the disability community who live at the intersection of racism and ableism. Now, with that being said, when the conversations about Lizzo and Beyonce's use of the derogatory word were used and discussed, it wasn't so much about getting them to correct it as it was about tearing them down. I mean, despite that, both Beyonce and Lizzo made quick work to remove the word. And after they discovered that it was not one that they were allowed to use, and Lizzo even issued a public apology shortly after. However, not only were Big Time Rush met with silence from the disability community, but fans were clamoring for the music to be released. Now, I'm not here to say what is or isn't ableist because I'm not a part of the disability community. But what I will say is that when we have conversations about getting rid of the casual use of ableist language, we have to hold everyone accountable and not pick and choose who gets a pass. But Daquon, I want to pass it back to you. I mean, do you think there's a double standard going on here?
Absolutely. There is a double standard going on because, like you said, this is a conversation that a lot of times lacks intersectionality. So many times there's a lot of people who would see an issue as either one thing or another. Either this is about ableism or it's about racism. Because as a white disabled person, your biggest, influence is ableism. That's the thing you see the most. But if you are a black disabled people like Ojawumi, you understand the nuances that come from ableism from all different types of communities and racism from all different types of communities. So, in a situation like this, the silence is very loud. How people aren't really talking about Big Time Rush, even after people who are actually paralyzed are creating a conversation around it. Because, like you said before, there are people, not everyone, but there are definitely people who look for any and every opportunity to tear down a Black person, especially Black women. So, in this conversation we have when it came to Lizzo and Beyonce, I'm not defending them for using the lyric. They absolutely should not have, and they should have, like they did, taken it out of the lyrics. But in a conversation like this, you saw so much really attacking of the character of these people instead of creating a conversation about why this is not okay. And frankly, it's not necessarily disabled people's place to have to educate everybody. But when you're creating attacks rather than creating a conversation, then it's like, what is the heart of this critique? Are we having a conversation of holding people accountable and making sure that casual ableism is not a part of our society like it is? Or do you just have a problem with certain people having the spotlight? Again, this is not the mindset of everybody, but there are people with this mindset. So, this is a conversation that really requires intersectionality, being able to look at this lens not from just an ableist perspective, but also ableism, racism, gender, sexuality, all of these different lenses that a situation like this can have, and really being able to keep your activism consistent. If you are calling somebody out, call everybody out. It doesn't matter whether their platform is, 30,000 people or 300,000 people or 3 million people. You need to make sure that regardless of who you're holding accountable, if they have a platform and they are not using it and they are perpetuating casual ableism, hold them accountable. Hold them all accountable.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that if we're going to make any strides to making a more respectful society, then we all need to be on the same page, because if we're not, we're just creating more division among marginalized communities. I mean, it changes the narrative, like you said, from an issue of ableism and racism to an issue of ableism or racism. And people on either side may use this lack of a response to Big Time Rush as a way to ignore the real issues here. Like, for example, Black people who are not a part of the disability community may look at this as a race issue alone and continue to disrespect those in the disability community, because they think that the only time that they will say anything or hold anyone accountable is if they're Black. And white people in the disability community may use this possible response from the Black community as a way to further perpetuate racism. And like you said before, understanding intersectionality is paramount in creating a better society, because in doing so, we understand that all marginalized communities are interconnected. People are more than just one thing. I mean, Daquon and I both experience oppressions of being Black, gay, non binary, and effeminate at the same time. And I also experience the privileges of being perceived by the world as a man. So even though I'm non binary, I don't experience the same oppressions as persons who are visibly trans or people with vaginas. I mean, when we discover the intersections of our own identities, we can begin to see the intersections in others. And I think that that's the first step in fostering more empathy between marginalized communities. But Daquan, I mean, what do you think? I mean, what can we do to ensure that we hold all people accountable and not just the people that don't look like us?
I think it really starts by listening to people when they call things out. It's not just when, the majority of people are calling it out, but especially when those who are at the furthest of marginalizations, those who are double, triple, quadruple marginalized because of all of these different identities that they hold. When they are calling something out, we need to listen, because at the end of the day, it affects them more than it affects anybody else. Because, like we said before, they would have to deal with ableism, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, all of these different isms and phobias because of how their identities intersect. So it comes down to really listening to all people, especially the most marginalized of our communities.